Hello everybody and welcome back to the Kamikaze YouTube channel. Today I got a new video about Yu-Gi-Oh! Genesis. I did a lot of research and I played a lot of Genesis in the last days to find out what are like the best decks right now in Genesis and what are like the meta decks you have to prepare against if you want to play in a Genesis format event, and also what are like the decks that have like huge potential and are not like top tier right now but can be easily top tier in the future. So this is also how I structured the video. The first decks that I present to you are like the top tier decks that you will face in every Genesis tournament, because those are just simply the best that you can play. And the other category, the second part of the video, will be the decks that have huge meta potential. So you will also see those decks, but maybe not as often, and they're maybe not as strong as the decks above that, but you will see those decks. So you kind of also have to prepare for those decks. For every deck I'm showing you, I will also share a sample deck list with you guys, but those are just sample deck lists I found online. They're in no way like optimized or built by myself, so just keep that in mind when we talking about the deck lists. Also, it would be really nice if you like the video, that you like the video. Also, you can write a comment. This would also help me. Maybe you just think a deck is way better than I give it credit for, or maybe way worse than I think it is. So just write me that in the comments. And also, it would really help me if you would subscribe to my YouTube channel. This would make me able to become a YouTube partner in the future. All right, let's get straight into it. Hey, the first deck I want to talk about here is actually Kewl Tune, or Kewl Tune, or whatever how you say it. Kewl Tune is a brand new archetype, and it got some pre-hits from the ban list, or the points list rather. It's Kewl Tune Q and Kewl Tune Clip. Those are, one of them is like a turn 0 hand trap that can during your main phase, if this card is in your hand, quick effect, you can special summon this card, and immediately after this effect resolves, you can synchro summon. So they have a turn 0 hand trap with Clip. They only have like 30 points they have to spend. The rest of the deck is completely free, so they can just use all of their points for like infinite hand traps, right? They can play Whaler, Ogre, Ghost Spell, Ghost Mourner. They can do whatever they want. They can even play like Delta, because it's also the tuner, and they can use the level 2 tuner to use them from their hand to go into their synchro monster. So Kewl Tune is arguably probably the strongest deck on this list, and it's probably the deck to beat in Genesis if you play in a competitive Genesis tournament. But this is probably the strongest deck right now. But it doesn't have to be this deck, right? There can be a lot more decks that you can face in Genesis. Also, they have another thing they can play. They can play Gravity Collapse, because they're spitting out all the synchro monsters they have. They're not really losing as Fuvalos. They're kind of weak to Veiler. You can Fuvalos in your own turn maybe, but yeah, overall the deck is good going first. Going second doesn't have a lot of weaknesses, does have really low points, and can play a lot of non-engines. So this is, I think, one of the best positioned deck right now in the Genesis meta. Artmage also got no real hit on the last points list. There was a bit of a change for crossout designator, but other than that, they got maybe like a decrease, because Yugioh was decreased by 10 points. So they only have to spend like 3 points for the Cartesia Yugioh fusion deployment engine. So they probably got even a bit stronger, but now, yeah, crossout Nibiru is like a huge problem for the deck, so they have to maybe still play crossout for 20 points, but they don't have to spend any points. They only have to spend 5 points on their engine still, right? And they still produce enormous strong endboards. And if you go second against this deck, it's kind of hard to win. You have outs with Nibiru, but they can play around it with crossout or with another card that I can show you in the other deck list that I also have here. They're kind of weak against Dark Ruler. It depends, but you can also could cross out a Dark Ruler, you could play the target for cross out, and maybe a bit weak to Ogre. So there are a lot of outs against this deck, right? But a lot of them cost points, and you kind of have to also draw them. If you don't draw them, if this deck goes first, it just builds a really unbreakable board with a lot of negates. And yeah, you could go for the hand trap aspect with the crossout designator for 98 points for the deck, or you could also play a version that looks a bit like this. This one plays board breakers and can also draw multiple board breakers, and the deck can always do something with board breakers going first, because the Academic Arcane Arts Acropolis let you discard cards more than once per turn. So you can just going first, discard all your Evenly, your Dark Ruler, your Dark Hole. You don't need them to just special summon your board, right? And going second, you just use them to break the board. And if you have like 2 board breakers, you can play the super expensive ones and then still have like in the extra deck space for Typhoon. And they also have the option to play Ilia Sylvia, because this one, where is it? They have a fusion spell they can play. It's this one. They can use the fusion spell to fuse a light spellcaster, which is the Terra and an illusion monster, into the Ilia Sylvia, so they can have like an out against Nibiru. They can use this, or they can just set this and have like a trap, so they also have like a layer board for playing against Dark Ruler. So there are a lot of options that you can play in this deck, because it just is like the engine is only 5 points, so it's still a super strong deck, and you will probably face it in a Genesis tournament. And if you want to win, maybe you should also play Artmage. The next deck is actually Branded. Branded got a huge boost by the last points list, because it just only got reduces, right? And we have a lot of cards that cost now 0 points. It costed a lot of points before. We also had like Albion that was 20 points before. Now it's only 5 points. We have Ash Dragon that's 0. We have Grangoniol that's 0. This just helps so much. And yeah, right now Bernard is in a super good spot, and you can easily play this deck and have also space for non-engine. It depends on you play if you want to play Mercuria. If you want to play Mercuria, you won't have 21 points. If you don't play Mercury, you have 21 points. I will also give you my deck list when I'm finished with testing. Right now, I have to decide between 2 deck lists, which I want to play. And when I'm finished, I will also present you the list and also make a deck guide for it. So stay tuned for that. Maybe also subscribe to the channel if you don't want to miss it. And yeah, I will show. This is not my list. I copied it from YouTube. I think it's from Metagames GX. I don't remember it where I got it, but I just copied it. And yeah, but you can see you can do different things. Also, Branded Fusion almost always resolves, because there is not a lot of Ash Blossom in this format, because it's just too expensive. You could just play 2 Whalers over that, and Whaler is also a really high impact card. Also against this deck, Whaler can be good, because you can Whaler the Aluber, but you have a lot of ways to dodge it with Book of Lunar Eclipse, with Book of Eclipse, and yeah, also if you have done Cartesia on the field. The only thing that this deck really grumbles to is like Fuvalos. Fuvalos is super strong against Branded. Also, Retaliating Sea can be really strong against Branded, but you can do like play arounds with Chaos Star Source Dragon or a Boulder Furious Dragon, depending on your hand. So you can even play if there is Retaliating Sea on the board. You have to just find out the combos. I can also show that in my guide how you play around that. And yeah, this deck is super good positioned right now. The only great weakness that this deck has here is the going second sometimes, because you cannot afford to play a lot of hand traps. So sometimes when people play like humongous boards, it's kind of hard to play through it. But if you draw like 1 or 2 board breakers, and then together with your engine, it's sometimes still possible to play to break those boards. So I think Branded is really good positioned in the meta right now in Genesis. You will face it, and can also play it if you want to win. And we also talk about Punk for sure. This deck got a bit weaker through the last points list. It got a hit on Punk Gem Dragon Drive. It's got from 0 to 15 points, so it took a lightly hit, but I think it's still a top meta deck in Genesis, and you will probably see it. Also because Gravity Collapse is still 0 points, so Gravity Collapse also a huge thing for this deck. But overall, this deck is super strong going first. You only have to spend like 30 points on your engine, and then you can spend a lot of points on your non-engine, your hand traps. When you go first, you also draw a lot of cards with Punk, Gem, Extreme Session. This can draw you 2 cards, and yeah, then you can draw into your hand traps. You can also play together with a Psychic engine. You can also play a deck that's more like a pure Psychic deck that has like less punk cards in it, so you will still have like even more points to spend. So this deck is really versatile. Also together with the Teleport Fusion, you can do so much with Punk, and it's always good if you go first. Going second though, I think this deck has a huge weakness. It's kind of hard sometimes to play into boards that have like a pop, and if you don't draw enough hand traps and your opponent can play through like the ogre, or he plays like a deck that's not that doesn't lose to ogre nip or stuff like that, it can be kind of hard to go second with this deck. That's what you have to keep in mind. And going first, it can also lose against some of the hand traps. Whaler is a good one. Nip is also fine against this deck, and yeah, also Wados can hit the field spell, which can be really crucial. So I think there are some cards, also Fuvolos, right? Fuvolos also good against this deck. So this deck has some weaknesses, but I think it's still one of the top tier meta contenders in Genesis right now. Dracotail. Let's talk about Dracotail. So on the last points list, Dracotail got a huge hit. Its 5 mana went to 30, also Kato Dracotail went to 15, and also Dracotail Flame got 3 points from 0 to 3 because it was played outside of Dracotail. And yeah, the Dracotail was really expensive before, but now it's even more expensive, and you can play even less of your engine. And yeah, this I think hit the deck pretty hard, but I think it will still be a top meta contender. And if you take a look at this, this is exactly 100 points, this list. We got Dark End Evaporation Dragon reduced from 5 to 1. So this can now be played in here. You can only play 2 if you go for the setup, but if you maybe remove one Mululu or whatever, you can even play 3 and maybe also play the other one, the Light End Evaporation Dragon. So you can play those cards, and this one is also pretty good going second because you can just pop a monster for free. So this is like a bit of a boost that the deck got, and yeah, it couldn't play a lot of non-engine before, so it's the same non-engine as before, but now you cannot play like cards like Droll or something. You need all of your points for your engine. I think this is fine for Dracotail. Dracotail was too strong with their engine and also some non-engine, so it will still be remaining a good deck because the engine is just so powerful, right? If you end on Flame, Horn, and Sting together with like Gulamel and Athelion and a 5 mana in hand, this will still be crazy, and you can still do that consistently with this deck if you just play more Arugula and Pen. It will be a bit less consistent than before, but it will still be a top meta deck. You still have Rahu at 0 points, so right, you can still play King of the Swamp, you can play the Shadows and stuff like that. So I think this deck will still remain really good, and yeah, we will see in the next format. I think you will actually face this deck, and you will also be able to play good or to have a good results with this deck. This is like not the perfect list you can play. I think there's a lot of things you can move around with the points for Dracotail still, but there will be a way to play a good Dracotail deck even like that in the future. So the hit was hard, but not hard enough, I think. So it will still be a top meta deck in Genesis for sure. The next deck we have to talk about is still Super Quantum. You know that I don't really like decks like this that play with huge towers and stuff like that, and they got their points upped on Magnus. Magnus is now 33 points, so this was actually a huge hit to the deck because they can now 33 points spend very few points less on hand traps, but still they still have like 66 points left, and as you can see in this list, they can still play like a Ghost Ogre, Nibiru, Whaler, even Fuva lost and Ghostbell and Haunted Mansion, so they will still have a ton of non-engine. They will have a super strong board going first because this deck is actually kinda immune to board breakers. The only thing that hits this deck are actually kaijus, and because a lot of towers got hit, the kaijus aren't played that frequently anymore, and a lot of decks also got them out of their main deck and moved them to the side deck. So if they go first, they just have a free game one if they can go for their Super Quantal Mech King Great Magnus, because this card is like super hard to out. And yeah, they can even play stuff like the Mjolnir Lock, which is like banned at the TCG because they can go for Kinkery, and yeah, there's just so many ways you can play this deck, and easy to win with this going first. Also a good going second capacity with a lot of hand traps. Also the engine can play good into boards, I think, and yeah, overall still one of the strongest decks in Genesis. It has some weaknesses because Wados is now in a lot of side decks. It's also not that great against Ogre because both those cards hit the feed spell, and the field spell enables the Mech King Great Magnus. And yeah, also Nibiru can hit the deck sometimes. Whaler is good, and Fuva is like a weird thing because Fuva needs to draw you either in hand traps or into kaijus, so it's sometimes hard. They can still go for Super Quantum Mech King Great Magnus under Fuva, so yeah, this deck has some weaknesses, but it's completely like immune to board breakers that are not kaijus. So it's for higher pointed decks, it's like really hard to win against this deck, because you have to stop them with hand traps or with kaijus, which you have to draw then, and then it's the question how many kaijus you play. Kaijus aren't that great anymore because there are not a lot of tower decks anymore, but this deck is still there. So yeah, Super Quantum is still super annoying but super strong, and you will face this deck for sure if you play a Genesis event, and you should be prepared to play against it, and you should know how to play against it. And yeah, you could also play this deck yourself if you want to be successful in Genesis event, because Great Magnus, it's 33 points now, but it's still a crazy card. The next high meta deck that you will see in Genesis is probably the new Hecahands deck together with the Chimera engine, because those decks just synergize so well with each other because of the illusion. This one can search the other illusion monsters, and yeah, it's just a new 2025 deck, and it got some points, some pre-hits. Gygas and also Xeno got the pre-hits, but those hits are like they're nothing, right? It's also alright because Hecahands is not the strongest deck, but they can build two Omni Negates going first, one for monsters and one for spell and traps. And if they have those, it will be really hard to break the board together with the Chimera engine on top. So yeah, but it's a bit hard to bridge into because you cannot really bridge into the Chimera engine where the Hecahands engine, but the Chimera engine can bridge into the Hecahands engine. So I think this deck is really strong because it only needs like 15 points for its engine. Then you can decide to play the Guardian Chimera if you want to, because you have enough points. Then you can still play like Veiler, Nibiru, Ogre, and also Book of Eclipse is really good in this deck because you can dodge effects with it, and it's also a good board breaker right now. You can still play some Kaijus in the main deck. I will also post a deck profile on that deck in the future. I'm testing around a bit with it, and I'm not really sure how I want to play the ratios right now, but something like this could be good. Some different non-engine, maybe play Chimera, maybe not play the Guardian Chimera, so you could even play Ash if you cut the Guardian Chimera, right? So there are a lot of options to play this deck, but this would definitely be a strong deck moving forward, and you will definitely face it when you play a Genesis event. And the last top tier deck in the Genesis format right now I want to talk about is actually Vanquish Soul. Vanquish Soul got no real change on the last points list, but got a huge change on the points list update before, so they kind of have to use all of their points still for their whole engine. They could cut one Holy Sue to play some non-engine, But the thing is, if you just pair this deck together with like the Regenesis engine and yeah, some powerful board breakers in the side deck, you could even play like Dogmatica Fleur-de-Lis the Thunderbolt, because you don't really need your extra deck in this deck. You can play Vados, which is a super strong card and it's 0 points, and play some Kaijus. So you can experiment around with this deck for sure. And a deck similar to this also topped one of the invitationals on the YCS. I think it was Pittsburgh. I'm not really sure, but it's like a similar list to this. So there was no change to this list, and yeah, so this deck will still definitely be one of the strongest decks in Genesis, and it won't be as strong as it was before their points list update, the last points list update, not the recent one. But yeah, it will still be a good deck because it's like pretty immune to a lot of the hand traps that are played right now in Genesis. The only hand traps that do something against this is maybe Vados on the field spell, or Ogre on the field spell, and maybe Whaler on Raisin, but you can dodge Whaler with Heavy Borger and Caesar Value. So there aren't really good cards to counter this deck. So if this deck actually rolls, it's super hard to stop. Some board breakers can be good against this deck, but also they something like Evenly, but this is like super expensive to play. So this deck kind of can rig sometimes, but if it rolls, it's like really hard to stop, and it doesn't have a lot of counters. So it's a really weird deck to play against, and you kind of have some advantages when you play it. Keep that in mind. This doesn't really have a lot of counters, so because the best card against this deck I think is Ash Blossom, but nobody can play Ash Blossom in the Genesis format. And yeah, this is why I think this will still be a top tier deck in Genesis format. Let's now also talk about the decks that aren't top tier, but kinda have top tier potential if maybe people find the right list, or play it more often, or get better on it. So those decks are really good, but not like the best decks. They're a bit worse than the decks I talked about now, but could be maybe in the future as good as the decks as I showed you before. So the first one is like White Forest. White Forest has a huge benefit of Droll being banned, because they couldn't play for Droll at all. Like going first or going second, this card always slaughtered them. But right now Droll is banned, so they only have to worry about Nip anymore. They could counter it with like Mudragon and Mechaba, so there are some things to do. You could also play like a huge amount of board breakers, also board breakers that are pointed, because the engine is like Diabell Queen, and they also have like the other LZ that is 22 points. They can play this, but they don't really have to. It just makes their one-cut combo with Sylvie a bit worse if they don't play it. But if you want to, you can only spend 25 points on your Diabell Queen, and that's it. More, you don't have to play more cards than that. You just simply rely on Astella, and the only real counter to Astella is like Whalering it. And if they don't have a Whaler, you will still be, because you cannot mourner this one, so the counter on Astella is probably Whaler. And you can also then do the same thing. You could play like a lot of board breakers that you can just discard with your Astella going first, or with the other White Forest cards. You could play the Toy Box engine. Toy Box is such a good engine. I will also make a version of this deck, how I want to play it, and I will also make an extra video for this deck, because I think it has huge potential in the next Genesis format, or in Genesis overall right now, because of the banning of Droll. Or banning the hiring of Droll, so it's 25 points, so nobody plays it anymore. Also, the Apophis, the Man with the Mark, the Odion, whatever you want to call it, the Temple of the Kings deck, got not a real hit on the last points update. It probably just got a bit better because Domino Spiral went to 0 points, and I think this deck is not. It wasn't really in the top tier in the last Genesis tournaments that we saw in the YCS, like the Genesis Invitational. It wasn't really there, but I think this deck is still pretty strong, because you only have like 5 points on Temple of the Kings, and that's basically it for the deck. So the deck is not really hit, so you can play a lot of pointed cards, and yeah, you kind of trap deck, so you kind of struggle sometimes if you go second with this deck, but you can play like so many Dominos cards in this deck now. You could play for 10 points, 3 Dominus Purge, 3 Songs of the Dominator, then 3 Dominus Spiral, because this is free, right? And then you could even play 1 Dominus Impulse. You don't have to do this. You could also play something else if you want to, but you could play 1 Dominus Impulse to just search it with Songs of the Dominator. And this card is, yeah, you cannot really use it from the hand because then you cannot use your earth effects anymore. But if you just set this card is so strong, and you get it for free with Dominus Songs of the Dominators. So I think this deck has high potential, and it's super scary always if you go second against this deck. So kind of have to keep it in mind that this deck actually exists, and it can be a really strong deck and a real contender for the top decks. The next deck I actually want to talk about is Voiceless Voice. Voiceless Voice got some help from the last points list update. It got Prayers of the Voiceless, Barrier of the Voiceless Voice reduced from 33 to 20 points. So this helped a lot, because now you have like different ways you can play the deck. You could play the deck with still 1 barrier and then play way more hand traps, or you could play 2 barrier and some preparation of rights to get more consistency. You can also play in this deck Dogmatica Fleur-de-Lis the Thunderbolt. So this is a free hand trap that's really good in Genesis right now. And yeah, you just have a lot of options with this deck, and now you will actually able to compete with this deck way better. And this now has like top tier potential for sure. It still has some problems though. It's still a huge engine. You still cannot play that much non-engine in this deck, but this will always be like a weakness of Voiceless Voice. Also, sometimes the going second of this deck can be a bit bad, but you have a super strong Omni Negate that cannot be targeted with Skull Guardian. You have a pop in this deck, so, and also together with the Regenesis engine, this is a really good deck, and it's well positioned in Genesis right now. If you like the deck, you can definitely play it on the tournament and do well with it. Let's now also talk about the Labrynth deck. Labrynth got a bit of a points change. It was a huge change actually for Labrynth, and they got Lady upped from 33 to 40 points, but they got Big Welcome Labrynth and also Welcome Labrynth reduced from 33 to 20 points, which was such a good change for the deck, because now they can decide to play like 2 Big Welcome, 1 Welcome Labrynth, and 1 Lady Labrynth, or just play 1/1 and then like this version play some other pointed cards. And yeah, this deck has now actually a chance to be played in Genesis, because it just fits there really well. You don't really need your extra deck, so you could side some Fleur-de-Lis, the Thunderous in the side deck. You can play Punishment. You also have like another turn 0 hand trap with Arias, so this is actually a trap deck that can go second. You also have like the Chandelier or Sobi Tobi Kuklok line, or going second line. So this is a trap deck that can actually go second and have some interruptions there. Also have like some strong interruptions with Arias and Kuklok Chandelier combo, and play some Dogmatica Fleur-de-Lis also, which this version isn't doing, but maybe you could put it into a side deck. And if you go first, you can play cards like the Eradicator Virus, Simul Archfiends. Those are super strong traps. You can play Destructive Daruma Karma Cannon, also a super good card, Mischief of the Gnomes. So their similar equation cannon is like a bit weird in Genesis, because you don't really know what you're facing, but you could also play this card. So there are a lot of options that you can choose to play with this deck, and you can be successful with Labrynth now for sure. And maybe it depends on the builds that the people have, and this can maybe also be a top tier contender, or is a top tier contender in the Genesis format right now. Alright, Radiant Typhoon. Radiant Typhoon got a huge hit on the last points list, which was super necessary, because the deck was like way too strong. It still had like 0 points on its engine, and it's a 2025 deck. It came out this year. It's super strong. It shouldn't be 0 points. So this was actually pretty necessary. So it declined in popularity a lot, but I don't think it's in any means it's like that, because if you see in this list, you can still play like almost a full Radiant Typhoon engine together with also the Runic engine, which also got a hit because of Runic tip got from 0 to 10 points. But you could still play Runic Radiant Typhoon, and it's still not even 100 points. So you can also play like the Cicada King still and the Totem Bird. They did also get upped, I think, in the last points list, and yeah, it's obviously weaker, right? You cannot play Pot of Greed anymore, but this deck is by no means dead, and I don't think it's like the best decks, under the best decks right now, but it's definitely a top tier contender right now. And if you like Radiant Typhoon, you can still play this in Genesis. You could also cut like the Runic Engine and play something completely different, play like pure Radiant Typhoon. This is like also still possible. The deck got way more expensive, but it's by no means not playable anymore. And I think it's still super strong, and you can still win tournaments with this deck, and it's definitely still a top tier contender in Genesis right now. And last but not least, I also want to talk about the Megalith. Megalith together with Incantation. I think this deck has huge potential. It's super scary, to be honest, because there is no more draw, right? No more draw, so this deck has a huge benefit from not having to face draw anymore. So you can play like the Incantation to their full potential. You also have that stuff like Chaotic Elements at 0 points, which can search the Chalice Slime. You have 1 point Manju as your normal summon, and their interruption is like super scary, which is the Megalith Arathron, which can pop like a lot of cards depending on how many cards you have in the graveyard. And yeah, this deck can play super well also through boards because of Megalith Nothra Pula. Hard to pronounce those names, but this one basically has a miscellaneous service effect where it says you cannot react to the effect of the Megalith ritual monsters anymore. So I think this deck is kind of scary, and it's not super popular, but I think it's still a top tier contender. It got some points on its Megalith Anastasis, but this was like 0 points list before, but it still has a lot of points that they can use for non-engine. And yeah, I think this deck will be a good deck, and maybe if the people experiment around a bit more with it, they will even make it way better. I don't think it's like the optimal build. You can also have like a 60 card build that I've actually faced one. It was a really cool duel, and yeah, I think you should give this deck a try if you like rituals and also rock monsters, and you will definitely have some success with that in Genesis right now. Alright, that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Please, if you want, leave a like and a comment. This would really help me. Also, if you subscribe, this would also make me super happy. And yeah, I will also make another video about the Genesis meta in the future. It will be like this or next week, where I talk about the hand trap and the board breakers right now, and how they are positioned in the meta game, and what you should play, and what is not like the best ones, right? If you don't want to miss that, subscribing would help. And yeah, stay tuned for the video and have a good day. Bye bye.